Okay, Mr. Jugan Chamani, you've listened to the legal framework. Let's come now politically. The political undertone that it has. Leju Belambela was at the United Nations General Assembly. We understand that Cameroon is a bilingual country, expecting that when you are talking in front of an international audience, English should be at least a call to prove that, okay, we are bilingual. But his entirely speech was in French, accepted. Now he's giving a different dispensation as of what we have in the communique.
That's right.
His outing is that calm normalcy is returning. He stated a lot of concessions that the government has arrived at to mitigate the conflict, that everything is normal. But when you look at the legal framework where Barrister Nkeya and Ngalim are coming from, is totally different.
That's right.
You're a politician. What are we not understanding politically?
Well, I said earlier that this country was wrongly constructed at the base. We have had in our history a series of circumstances that have complicated our lives or have rendered our country complicated. One, the UN chose to issue what was a German colony, not to one, but to two different countries, and failed at the time it was ready to go to independence to reunify the whole country and then take it at once into independence. The UK took British Cameroon and then broke it into two, Northern Cameroons and then Southern Cameroons. Nobody really knows.
Convenience purposes.
Exactly, because those that know the results of the referendum of February 1961 will recall that if they have used Northern and Southern Cameroon as one constituency, the whole of it will have come to Cameroon.
Yes.
They decided to do one referendum in two different constituencies. You know why? That's again another issue. And then you have this back deal between the UK and France, but with France itself already issuing a fake independence, crushing out the nationalist movement, raising their own leaders, giving them independence, giving them the power, without even going through. Mr. Aidjo was nominated president. He didn't go through
Election. It was not
election.
elected.
He was not elected. So you see that when in 1961, Mr. Foncha sits with Aidjo, I'm asking myself, who are you sitting with? This country is at war.
Yeah.
It has been at war for 6 years, and then we will continue to be at war 9 years after. And the legitimacy of Aidjo was questionable. They had all the rights. I mean, Foncha, Andele, and all the delegation had all the right to question. But when you go and read the minutes of that meeting, I mean, you know, with the exception of Fonlon, Dr. Yes, that was bringing a different voice. And then that was being silenced by the elected officials telling him, look, you just hear technical capacity.
You have just accompanied us.
Just accompanied us. Just shut up, man. No. You know, so they were, I mean, the reverence that they had toward Aidjo, I mean, Ndele as well as Foncha. I have all those texts. That constitutional conference was a farce.
Yeah.
And those, you are a lawyer, if you read the 1961 Federal Constitution, the only federalism in there is the word federal. Because Mr. Aidjo had all the powers. He was the one appointing the prime ministers in both states. He could do basically anything that he wanted. And France has had, and then that's an historical fact, an annexation agenda. It's clear. It was, you know, like even I just said it at the conference in 1961, that everything that we do is just temporarily. It's temporary. And then you know why? It was because they couldn't fight on two fronts, UPC and then the Anglophone. So they kind of say, okay, yeah, they kept federalism. The time for us to finish, to get you to support us in the fight against UPC. And then when they finish, and then, you know, I have a tape of Foncha, you know, saying proudly how the mobile wing were tracking the terrorists, UPC terrorists and stuff like that. So he helped Aidjo fight the UPC. Now when Aidjo and France vanquished UPC, now they turn against him. And then wipe out that thing. Because some people are asking, why did they do that in 72 instead of 1966? Because in 1966...
there was one party already.
It was, and do you remember who called for a unified party?
I think it was Muna.
Ndele.
Ndele.
He's the one that did it. So when I bring all of this together like this is to say to the young generation that this country started in the wrong footing. I'm not trying to blame all the elders and then say they were bad, all of them were bad or something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they themselves found themselves in very complex...
in a trance.
Complex situation.
They were the deep blue sea.
That's right. You know, because the UN were doing things that went right, the UK and France that were very influential were also doing things that went right. And then, you know, so you will see the delegation of Southern Cameroons coming there divided. You know, they were completely divided and absolutely unprepared.
It means that the war was unavoidable, based on what you are saying.
Look, the stage was set from onset to arrive at this crisis because nobody, you know, people were not genuine in none of the things that they were doing at that time.
Now, how do we go from here?
That's exactly where I think that we have to be politically creative. Because what has happened there is that at the conference, everybody thought that they were kind of tricking the other person, you know, that okay, maybe we could get this and then later on we will get that. But what you saw is that there was a system that had a lot of force. That is, I mean, you had basically a territory that were fighting against, they were not fighting, they were pitting themselves against a very organized, that is, when I look at the delegation of Mr. Muna, Mr. Foncha, and then he was there with Mr. Muna, Mr. Ndele, and then they had the police chief, and then the chief prosecutor, the prosecutor general. In front, yes, you had Aidjo, and in fact, you had a government. And then plus behind that, you had those French advisors that were there. So the setting was so unbalanced that nothing balanced could come. Nothing balanced could come out of it. You know, so we missed out. Now, who is to blame for that missing out? That is, we missed out on this project that UPC and KNDP and One Cameroon had of saying, can we unify first and then walk hand in hand toward independence? Maybe things would have been better. But now, you know, if we go with ifs, you know, can't do anything. The problem is that now we are faced with this problem.
Yes, we
are faced with the problem today. And when I look at it, and I say to myself, one, we have a government that is normally ultimately responsible for our security. They say that they are elected. So normally they should take full responsibility. But clearly,
when you say they say they're elected, what do you mean? Do you mean
oh,
that they,
you know, I mean, we all know. Come on, you know,
this is for the sake of clarity.
I ran.
No, this is for the sake of clarity.
I ran for president.
You are a senior figure in the country. So
I ran for president in 2004, and then after that election, well, in the course of the election, in fact, during the campaign, I explained to the Cameroonian people that the electoral code of Cameroon made it impossible for anyone other than Mr. Biya to win. I am glad that some high lawyers just found that out in 2018, that is 14 years after, but it is the truth that the way the electoral code, and then not only the electoral code, but because that electoral code is written in the case of a political dispensation that is defined by the Constitution, the whole thing makes it impossible for anyone to win. But let's grant one thing, is that it's the legal government, all right? So, but we said earlier that there is a failed leadership. Clearly, the man has proclaimed himself head of state, but he's not even doing what a leader of a nation must do. So the question is, what do we do to make things move? And for that, I want to remind people of the French mindset. Never in the history of France, never in the colonial history of France has France granted anything without bitter struggle. Never. France is not England. England will find a trickish way. They will connive here and there, give here, take there, maintain the thing to their advantage.
Sense of balance.
France is brutal and knows no compromise. And it is France that has set the state that we have in Cameroon today. It's very important to understand it. You know, the notion of pure negotiation that can produce a result is not part of the French mindset. And therefore, when you're dealing with France, you have to deal with them in a language that they can understand. And that language can only be a language of mustering enough force to make it impossible for them to do otherwise than what you want to do.